Thanks for having me. I think this is a super exciting topic. I think it's a very important topic for us. As a consultant, I'm quite used to sort of come with the solutions. So it was a bit tricky for me to come in and talk about the problems and not get to offer a charge for providing the solutions. It's a bit of a new role for me. I would like to talk about four things. The first thing I will talk a little bit about is, what's keeping me up at night? What is the big challenges? So even zoom out beyond technologies and look quite broadly. The second topic I will talk a little bit about, how can we focus? And I believe we need to have one simple proxy to focus in. And the one that I believe in is value. Where is the value from different type of technologies? What industries, what sectors, what is the use cases to go after? And that is a very helpful methodology to prioritize. Then I will deep dive into two areas, which is the connected city and connected transportation, and a bit frame, some of the challenges that we see and some of the solution areas, but without going into, the detailed solutions. So if you look over time, we are actually in a period that you almost can characterize as the golden age of business. Business is actually doing quite well. Productivity gains year over year has accelerated and are currently on a fairly decent level. But at the same time, there are a number of challenges that we need to address. And I think the UN sustainability goals is in a good representation of the type of challenges that we have in society today. There's four big trends that I would like to talk a little bit about today. And I think this is the areas that, keep me up at night, some of them, but also, some of the reasons why technology and innovation is so important. So I think the first one, just showing the scale of, is the size and growth of emerging cities or emerging economies and cities in general. I'll talk a little about interconnectivity in the global economy. I will talk about the aging population and also what that means for the labor force available. And then I will come into disruptive technologies. And I think disruptive technologies, to me, is also one of the solutions for the other areas and the other challenges. So looking at the first one, emerging economies, China will actually represent almost 50 cities of the top 200, 25% of the big ones. It's quite massive development. I would like to turn your attention to this city. It's a small city, or fairly small city outside Beijing, called Tianjin. Who has been there? Anyone in the room? 2 people? Very good. Just to sort of show the size of it, if you go back a couple of years, the sort of economic system in this city is about the same size as Stockholm. But in 15 years, the Tianjin's business is actually going to grow significantly quicker than Stockholm. And it becomes much bigger than Stockholm. It actually becomes as big as Sweden as a whole. Just showing sort of the magnitude of scale in this, both from a market opportunity point of view. So it's equally important to focus on this city in China as to focus on Sweden, if you want to sort of capture a fair share of economic value. But also as the challenges for Sweden as a country to compete with, for example, India. There are 800,000 engineers graduating from universities every year. So just how do we, as a country, deal with sort of the massive scale of the emerging economies? I think another big question that keeps me up at night is trade flows. And also here, you can actually see that trade flow has really taken off in just the last 10, 15, 20 years. So it's a massive increase. And we also see here that if you go back 30 years, we were around 20% of the overall world economy, and now we're up at 40%. So this becomes extremely important. And then, of course, if certain people become president in certain countries, trying to cut out these type of trade flows, it has huge impact on the overall economic growth. And maybe not only just reducing the acceleration in the growth, but potentially even sort of causing a negative growth, right? I think another key thing is the connectivity of our economies. So looking from the 50s up to 2000, we actually didn't have a global recession. So we had a number of recessions, but still, across the full world, it was a positive growth. So if we had a poor time or challenging time in the US, maybe Europe was booming, right? But with connectivity increasing, actually, a few years back, we had our first truly global recession. And just showing the importance, if we do the Brexit or if we have a challenging election in the US, right, this can really become a big, massive challenge on a global basis. Another thing is the aging population. So in the advanced economies, a fairly large share of the overall population will be above 60. So we need to, as a country, sustain this, be able to sustain the aging population. And what we will see in terms of productivity for the working population is actually in the past 50 years, yes, we had a productivity gain of 1.8%, but we also had a growing working population that also contributed with a fairly significant part to the overall economic growth in the countries. Going forward, we can assume a similar productivity gain, but we will not see the same benefit from a growing working population. So we will have, a slower growth, everything else equal, driven by this, that needs to support a larger non-working population as well. So quite a challenge. You can do a similar analysis actually on many other things. If you look at sort of asset value, for example, it could be your, houses, apartments. It could be the stock that you're saving. If you look at the value increase over the last couple of years, actually 50% of the value growth has been driven by reducing interest rates. And then the rest of the 50% is the increasing demand and value, et cetera. But 50% is that. Now when we're down at zero, that will not happen. So you can expect half, basically, the asset value growth going forward compared to in the past. And if interest rates starts to go up, I think it's a reasonable, scenario that actually that also eats up some of the sort of underlying fundamental asset growth. So a couple of, big challenges, right? And I think technology connectivity, to me, is one of the key things to actually, address this. I think this is really the opportunity we have to drive productivity, to be able to sustain and both from a sort of economic point of view, but also from a sustainability point of view going forward. So looking at technologies, I think is really impacting every aspect of our lives. I think the way that we consume media, the way that we are transporting ourselves is really rapidly changing. And now also, the business side and government side is picking up. And what is interesting is that I would say overall, this is a fairly crowded space, but I think here there's a lot of value, a lot of opportunities, but also a lot of white space for us to go after and fix, both in the connected cities, both in connected transportation, and a number of different other areas as well. Talking to engineers, I think you engineers, to a large degree, I think what we are seeing as a couple of underlying trends is just exponentially, more computing power, more memory, etc., is one of the key drivers why technology is accelerating. We also see that adoption speeds of new technologies is rapidly increasing. And we also see that technologies is really changing some of the fundamental truths of business. So you can now today, for example, be the biggest provider of hotel nights without owning any hotels, right? You can also serve, for example, through different types of services, new customers with almost no additional cost. So it's really changing the world and the way companies need to adopt and play. And I think one of my biggest examples is WhatsApp, which basically went in and went after the SMS revenue of the telecom operators and took out that value pool from them without really charging any value or sort of money for the customers. Really killed it, really reduced it, but then they got money from from actually being sold. So that's how they sort of created value for their owners. And of course, for traditional companies, it's quite difficult to protect yourself from this. But it's a positive thing. Technologies can create enormous amount of value. And I think the value that technologies can provide is, it's so big numbers, I don't even know what it is in Swedish. It's huge amounts. And I think the key technologies that is really driving it is, mobile internet and Internet of Things. So really the connectivity, being able to sort of provide information at different places and also collect and optimize based on it. Another one is automation of knowledge work. And this could also be, simple tasks like, invoice control, etc. But it could also be very advanced tasks like, diagnosing cancer and so on. So it's quite different flavors than cloud technology, advanced robotics and so on. On the right-hand side, you have a couple of points. First of all, a big part of the value is created in B2B. I truly believe, we as a country and maybe also you as a region need to be sort of better at going after this potential. A lot of the information is not used. So there's a lot of data that we could sort of analyze and potentially extract value from. There's also a big thing about interoperability. And also finally, a large part of the value is actually leaked. So it's very difficult to capture this value if you are a company. So you need to be very clever on your business model. That's the tool that you can extract value using. And hence, new business model in a digital context is super important. Looking at Sweden, we've done an analysis. We haven't published it yet. But when we look at Sweden, we believe this can create almost a 25% increase in GDP over the next 10 years. So that's the 2%, 2.5% GDP increase you need to sort of get in order to compensate for sort of the slower growth in working population. So big opportunity. I think currently we are probably going after and capturing 25% of this. So it actually needs quite significant actions to go out and capture this, right? I think healthcare is just one such example. Fairly simple solutions needed. The technology is available today, but we just need to get through, right? We need to be able to cut through the decision making and so on in order to go after and actually realize this potential. A couple of the ones that we are discussing today, right? The connected city includes healthcare, public sector to some degree, energy, real estate, constructions, and so on. So it's represented across many categories here. I think the other one, transportation as well. So I'll deep dive now on the connected city. And I think it was also mentioned in the introduction that a very big part of the population is actually living in the cities. Cities is already today and representing a very big part of the overall value and economics. But it's also contributing a lot to the emissions. When we look at cities, there is a large number of challenges already today. For example, clean air, also different types of pollutions, etc., and also flooding risks driven by environmental issues. So it's really needed to be addressed from a sustainability point of view quite urgently. And apart from the cost savings, you can then both increase the efficiency, the quality of life, etc. And a couple of the technologies areas is home technologies, healthcare, energy, wastewater, and so on. So I think that's a couple of the areas that needs to be addressed in order to achieve these results. And what we are seeing then is a number of areas emerging, right? Of course, the home smart home, different types of ecosystem, heating control, lighting control, those type of solutions. Education, healthcare, also a very big area with a lot of number of different application areas. Infrastructure, security, energy, transportation. And how do we know where to prioritize among all these opportunities? So what we have done and spent quite a lot of time working on is trying to build a fact base for this. So what we have done is looked at hundreds and hundreds of use cases across all these areas and try to understand what is the benefit from an economic point of view. So it's something to start prioritizing using. And I think if you look on the top one, for example, the air quality problem, it's enormous amount of value from a sort of economic value in it. But of course, there's also a lot of environmental values in actually addressing these type of pain points. So it goes really hand in hand, both the sustainability side and the economic side. But I think something like this is needed for us to prioritize and focus in on the key areas that is needed going forward. Moving to transportation, another sort of view on this is that if you look at today's transportation system, for example, there's just so much waste, enormous amount of waste, when you look at it on a system point of view. For example, a Swedish car used 2% of the time, standing parked, the clear majority. Transportations, when the transportation is going, it's very rarely filled on the way back. So often the utilization rate or the fill rate is 40%. It's also not, used a big part of the time. We are spending almost 500,000 working years waiting and stuck in traffic, right? Quite significant. A lot of accidents caused by humans. And also the roads is actually very, very low utilization of the roads, despite being so much congestion. So it's only a fraction of the available capacity on the roads that is actually used. So it's just looking at transportation from a system point of view, it's quite astonishing how inefficient it is. And I think, how do you address this? A couple of areas that is really supporting each other. Connectivity. Can you be better at matching demand and supply of transportation? Can you provide the shortest route, avoid congestion? Electrification. Currently only a few percentage points of the energy in petrol is actually used to move the goods. So it's 95, 98% loss in that. And if you move to electricity, you can have much higher efficiency. Shared. Why not share the resources and assets? And similar, autonomous. Why do we need to spend time and focus on actually driving the vehicles? And if you look on this from this point of view, system point of view, addressing these things, you can really take it down from maybe 70 cents per mile down to 10. So it's like a factor 7 reduction by taking out all this waste. So looking at from a system point of view, using digital technologies, massive improvements. If you would focus on the engine, maybe you can get 1 or 2% per year, right? And this is also what companies are seeing, right? So it's actually no surprise that there's quite a lot of development in connectivity for cars. I think most big OEMs are working on it. There's a lot of companies, both here in Lund and elsewhere, spending time on it. The same thing with electrification. A lot of different solutions, both third-party solutions, and most of the OEMs is also developing their own mobility type of solutions. And also companies working with different types of autonomous vehicles, right, and pushing this. But I think this link is quite important, right? Understanding the waste, understanding how the different solutions areas fit together, and then the solutions, right? Again, understanding the value, going after the value, and many of the leading companies are actually getting this right and working this type of way. Also, what does this mean then for Sweden as a country, right? Again, also quite massive improvements. So if you just look the next 10 years, we will not have the opportunity to really replace a big part of our car fleet. So we will be stuck in quite similar solutions. So I think in the short, medium term, the opportunity is more moderate. But if you take a longer perspective, the value from improved transportation is just huge. And I think there's probably a lot of secondary types of effects that is not included in this analysis. And I think as we see these opportunities and move forward, I think it's really up to us to change. I think there's a lot of publications that is done on what do we as a country or a region need to do in order to capture these opportunities. And people are pointing at we need new regulation, we need certain support from the government. But I actually think that we can really capture this opportunity ourselves, right? We just need to get our act together and go after it. I think we need to go after it together in different types of ecosystems or clusters that you're representing here today. So I think it's really up to us to make a difference here. Good.
Thank you very much. I think it proved my London story about being a bit stupid here on Earth. But I mean, it's really interesting. I have a question before I'm letting you in, and it's, as you said here, do you see a shift in the business models, in the way people think? We know that these 17 Sustainable Development Goals at UN, and actually all the member states of the UN has signed. Are we looking into this in a different way now? Because we do not want our kids to die because of the pollution, as we see. I mean, people are getting sick.
To some degree, yes. I think the best companies in Sweden that is, really understanding these, where is the inefficiencies, where is the values, they are also launching, big opportunities to go after the sustainability angle. How can we, for example, save 10-12% fuel costs through thinking holistically about sort of how we look at the transportation system, for example. So they are really going after it from both a sort of economic angle, but also a sustainability angle. And then you can, of course, discuss, is it the business they are going after and branding it as a sustainability thing or not? But I mean, it really goes hand in hand.
Do we have any questions from the audience?
No. Good. I will be around after as well. So.
No, you were just saying hi to each other. Okay, that's good. You can do that. But I wanted to, and then I have another additional question. I mean, how do we get people to get a little bit faster? I mean, I think a little bit of this that we are defining this challenge today is also to get, we need kind of to feel the sense of urgency. We cannot wait. I mean, our children aren't going to look at us and say, why didn't you do anything? We have the tools. It's not like, how do we get people to do this change and companies to do the change?
I think that there are or what we are seeing is that there are different clusters or constellations where, for example, technology company CEOs and transportation company CEOs and leaders from the public sector is actually starting to go together and create forums for discussion on, how can we go after this opportunity? Because I think you really need both the public and the private sector going after these opportunities together. And I think companies, there is quite a lot of mobilization and getting these initiatives started, create this fact base so they can actually decide how do you go after these opportunities, pilot it, create test beds, different prototypes projects, and then scale the solution that is proven to generate the value and solve the problems that you're trying to address.
And yes, we have a question. Do we have? Please say your name and where you're from.
My name is Shan and I work at the Lund Commune as public procurement and sort of working with sustainability issues. And I think everything looks very fine, but I'm sort of lacking the view of sustainability. If we get a perfect town in Lund, where have all these goods been produced and by whom, and what is included in the definition of sustainability, all the ethics questions about the work environment for those who's actually doing this perfect thing, which would be brilliant for Lund, but the production might be in quite awful conditions in China or wherever. I'm sort of lacking the whole picture.
Yeah, no, it's a very complex question, right, to solve. Getting all those dimensions fully covered and finding the sort of optimal solutions, both making it cheap to produce, etc., and locally produced, but also the workers' environment and those kind of things, right? I think it's very difficult. I don't think there is an easy answer to your question.
Maybe that it should be cheap is the problem.
Could be.
Maybe we have to pay for the whole sort of circle of sustainability.
But a comment to that, isn't that one part of my question from the start, that companies more and more are looking into the bigger picture, that we are part of a bigger global challenges, and we cannot just find solutions, whether it's because we find a business or a money driving force, or to solve a problem. And being part of the bigger picture, we need to be part of the bigger discussions globally as well, which will lead, hopefully at least, for some of the companies that more looking into the legacy or leaving something better behind, that they also take those kinds of things into account. I don't know if you see that, or, I mean, there is, I can see some trends going on that, to that.
Absolutely, and I think it is not sustainable to sacrifice, long-term sustainability and even long-term sort of company values on the sort of short-term profit or sort of getting the product cheap, to your point.
All right, my name is Olle Hydbom, spending my time halfway sort of in the academia and halfway in private sector. And I believe that you've sort of shown the challenges pretty well. And I've seen from my work in logistics at the university that one of the really big issues is the lack of incentive actually for the actors to share information to make the whole system more effective.
Yep, fully agree.
And so my question really is, has anyone, particularly you or anyone else, seen any of those incentives that actually might force the actors in the logistics area globally to actually be able to share information and henceforth build a more efficient system?
Yeah. So what we're seeing in a number of cases, and I've, for example, worked, some bit in the sort of port terminals, etc., where this is all, one of the big questions, right? Where they are starting to build the platforms and starting to share information. So I think, for example, there's like 2.4, 2.5, movements of every container when you sort of offload and unload it to the ships. And if you just know how they are stacked on the ship, when you sort of plan the offloading, you can take off, almost half a movement. But also, if you would then take it all the way back to the port who's actually loading it and optimize the loading, you could cut off another 0.4, 0.5 of these movements, right? So it's a super big opportunity. What I think we are seeing is that more and more collaboration is starting to happen. So I would say it's really the actors themselves to start to work together across the interfaces and going after this value and finding models to actually share this value. And in those cases, they're also quite transparent and wanting to share the information. But I don't see that there's government control or government sort of incentives really, but it's really the responsibility for the actors to start collaborating and taking this opportunity. And I think they are doing. I think there is quite a lot of movements also in Sweden. It could be more. It could be more. We're going after the 20%.
I think it was a very good. We're going to partly come back to that question actually in the panel. So I think that was a very good question and an end to your presentation. So thank you very much, Peter. And you are still here, and you're going to be around to discuss further if anyone else has a question. Thank you very much.